Bloodroots is a single core loop honed to perfection. No side objectives, no currencies to dig around in crates for, no progression systems, no padding. Just chop and chop and chop. Then go get another weapon because you just broke yours, and chop till you drop. It's glorious. It's also pure mayhem. Bloodroots takes you on a murder spree across the entirety of the Wild West, and it is an absolute riot. But what really makes this game sing is its weapon system, which elevates Bloodroots beyond just another Hotline Miami-like into its own thoroughly entertaining beast. As always, I'm Alex, and this is First 5, where I ask if games are worth your time, not your money. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm gonna tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. And today, we're painting the town red in Bloodroots. Before we get too deep into the review, I did receive a free advance review copy of this game, so heads up. Bloodroots probably looks a little familiar to anyone who's played Hotline Miami or any of the small genre of action games that have followed in its wake. You're massacring a bunch of mooks through a bunch of tightly constructed, handcrafted levels, there's blood everywhere, and one hit puts you all the way back to the start. And yet, of the 3 Miami-likes I've covered so far, Bloodroots' personal brand of choreographed blood-drenched dance might feel like the most unique yet. Bloodroots moves at a unique, more frantic tempo. When you have a good weapon, you're an unstoppable machine that can effortlessly cleave through anything the game throws at you, but every weapon only lasts about 5 seconds before it breaks and you need a new one. Sometimes you can chart your way through a level just right, snagging carefully doled out knives and axes every few feet. But just as often, you're left scrambling for more improvised weapons. Carrots, giant fish, even snowballs are deadly in your hands. But regardless of what you use, you're constantly going to be switching between attacking and scrambling for something new to attack with on the fly. When combined with enemies that don't like to give you much breathing room, that desperate scramble to make sure there's always at least something in your hands is compelling enough on its own. But whatever you do pick up informs how you approach a situation just as surely as having no weapon at all does. Most of Bloodroots' weapons also give you unique movement options. Some weapons like swords and daggers let you dash through multiple opponents, while other items can be a bit more dramatic. And making proper use of these weapons' additional movement options is not just the secret to beating a level, it's what makes the entire game tick. Pick up a saber and you can safely attack enemies with impunity, or go grab a grappling hook and you're practically invincible as you zip around an arena. But the moment that weapon breaks, you're weaker and slower than your enemies, so you'll have to plan ahead to make sure that you land somewhere in easy reach of another weapon. And those weapons are also just as likely to propel you into the next pack of enemies that want to break your fragile one-hit point body, which creates a dynamic where leaping forward to deal with one problem often just creates a cascade of new issues you have to keep charging forward to deal with. And in these moments, you become the unstoppable hurricane of death Bloodroots wants you to be, tearing through entire levels of enemies without ever stopping. And I cannot stress this point enough. Other games, especially games that echo Hotline Miami, want you to play fast, but few games so successfully encourage that behavior as Bloodroots' constant mad dash for more pointy objects does. Most games require you to perfect them over multiple playthroughs and countless hours before you can look even half this stylish. Only a very select few can capture that feeling on a first run, and even fewer from practically the moment you start playing them. About a year ago, I talked about how Ape Out mechanically forced the player to always be moving forward, and I also praised Katana Zero for how its loop of repetition and memorization also created those wonderful moments where you feel like an unstoppable badass. But Bloodroots? Bloodroots does both of those things, and it arguably does it better in both cases while bringing something new to the table with its weapon system. But we're not even done, because weapon selection isn't limited to just swords, axes, and fish. The first time I realized I could jump on a cart and ride it into people, I was grinning ear to ear, and Bloodroots immediately encouraged my behavior by setting up entire sections in the game based around hopping from cart to barrel. And Bloodroots throws new objects at you fast enough that once riding carts full of hay starts feeling old, you graduate up to explosive barrels that can detonate and launch you across the map. But it sure is a good thing that all this mayhem is so thoroughly entertaining because there's not a whole lot else to actually talk about. There's the occasional platforming section or boss fight that are respectable extensions of Bloodroots' core loop, but mostly the only other thing to talk about is the game's mixed approach to its narrative. The setup itself is pretty straightforward. You're Mr. Wolf, and your Wild West gang of outlaws has shot you in the back. And after inexplicably coming back from the dead, you're off on a single-minded quest for vengeance as you check each name of your old gang off your list one at a time. Quick side note, if these guys aren't the most one-piece crew of villains in video games, I don't know who is. Bloodroots' narrative is passable, but nothing to write home about. The big twist gets heavily signposted for a good 3 hours straight, so it's almost impossible not to see it coming. But even so, its execution still managed to baffle and confuse me when it finally happened. So the long-term narrative, while making an admirable effort to both stay mostly out of the way of all the hacking and slashing, while also being entertaining in its own right, still ends up a bit of a bust. The moment-to-moment dialogue is a lot better, though, mostly because all the other characters spend their time just non-stop roasting Mr. Wolf. Overarching plot aside, the writing is still pretty entertaining, be it a villain taunting the wolf as he hunts him down, or chatting him up as a spectral companion at his campfire after their inevitable demise. But it's time to bring this one to a close. What do you get out of 5 hours with Bloodroots? I had to go a half hour or so over time, but I did get to see the entirety of the game. For a lot of people, I imagine that's where the experience ends, and what an experience it's been. But if you're still hungry for more, Bloodroots has high scores to chase, which in turn give you different hats that change how the game plays. And while the game can start to drag a bit and become a little exhausting in its final act, thanks mostly to increasingly sparse checkpoints, everything about Bloodroots' underlying core loop is absolutely sound. Bloodroots does something I don't think I've ever seen a Miami-like do before. Actually make the player's actions fun to engage with. Most of its forebears give you a relatively straightforward character with only a simple handful of moves, but still make themselves engaging through tight level and enemy design. But Bloodroots' weapon system blows that mindset away. Between how genuinely varied the weapons can all feel thanks to how they affect your movement, the way that different levels mix and match weapons to create unique scenarios, and the constant cycling between different weapons every 5 seconds, Bloodroots successfully creates a combat system that is just inherently fun to play with, and that alone makes this game noteworthy. But Bloodroots also gets far more than just that right, and it all comes together in a cocktail of mayhem that is absolutely worth your time. And if you somehow haven't gotten enough of an adrenaline rush playing through Bloodroots, I've also covered both the dystopian Katana Zero and the impeccably jazzy Ape Out. But I hope you enjoyed this first 5 review. If you did, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. If you're looking for games that value your time and don't pad themselves, I'm your guy. Thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all next week.